In the Bitterroot Valley in the fall of 1891, Elias Mercer was told his ranch was dying because his cattle had caught a fever. That was not true. The sickness was quieter than fever, older than panic, and far more patient. It was waiting in the water. Elias did not know that yet. All he knew was that 31 head had gone down since June. The grass around his north pasture had turned the color of old rope, and the bank in Missoula had stopped writing polite letters. He was 36 years old, thick through the shoulders, burned dark from sun and wind, and proud in the dangerous way ruined men can be proud. He would sell a saddle before he borrowed money. He would skip supper before he admitted hunger. And he would stand in a failing field for an hour, staring at dead grass, because leaving first felt too much like surrender. The Mercer place had once been a good ranch. Not grand, not famous, but good. 240 acres tucked against the low brown shoulder of the Bitterroot Hills. A spring-fed draw. Enough timber for fence repair. Enough grass, in honest years, to winter a respectable herd. His father had called it an ugly piece of land with a loyal heart. By 1891 that heart looked spent. 3 dry summers had thinned the pasture. A hard winter had taken calves. Then came the sickness. The animals did not die dramatically. That was what made it worse. They stopped gaining weight. They stood too long at the trough. Their eyes dulled. Their bellies tightened. Then, one morning, one would be lying in the dust with flies already finding the corners of its mouth. 2 stock doctors had ridden out. One blamed bad feed. One blamed fever. Both took Elias's money and left him with bottles that did nothing. By October he had 73 cattle left on paper. In truth, only 46 looked worth saving. Old Amos Creed, the only hand who had not walked off, watched Elias count the herd one evening and said the thing neither man wanted to hear. You keep asking cowmen for cow answers. Elias looked at him. Amos was nearly 60, bow-legged from a lifetime in the saddle, with a face like a boot left too long beside a stove. He spat into the dust and nodded toward the north draw. Maybe it ain't a cow answer. Elias almost laughed, but he was too tired. Amos told him about a small Chinese settlement beyond the old placer diggings, where the railroad men and abandoned miners had built gardens on ground white men said would grow nothing. There was a family there, Amos said, with a woman who knew animals, water, roots, and food storage. Not parlor knowledge, not book talk, working knowledge, the kind a hard place either teaches you or kills you for not having. Elias wanted no part of it. Not because he hated the Chinese the way some men in town did. He told himself that at least, but he did not want to ride into a settlement of strangers, and confess that everything he knew had failed. For 2 more weeks, pride held him in place. Then his best red steer fell beside the north trough. Elias found it before sunrise. The animal was still warm. Elias took off his hat, stood over it, and understood with a cold clarity that pride had become more expensive than help. That afternoon he saddled a tired bay horse and rode south toward the abandoned diggings. The settlement was smaller than he expected. 12 timber cabins, 3 vegetable plots cut into neat squares, laundry snapping on lines, smoke rising straight from iron stovepipes into the blue mountain cold. No one welcomed him loudly. No one begged him to leave, either. A gray-haired man named Chen Bao translated enough for Elias to explain himself. The ranch, the dead cattle, the note due at the bank, the winter coming like a door closing. Chen listened without interruption, then led him to a woman mending a leather harness beside a shed. Her name was Lian Zhou. She was 28, narrow-boned, steady-eyed, with black hair pinned severely at the back of her head, and hands that looked too small until Elias saw how confidently they moved. Her father had come through California, worked mines, then followed railroad labor north. Her mother had grown up on a farm in Guangdong, where pigs, goats, rice water, salted fish, and survival all belonged to the same education. Lian had learned English from a Methodist primer, freight labels, and arguments with men who assumed she understood less than she did. When Elias finished speaking, she asked him 3 questions. How close was the sick pasture to standing water? Had the cattle started licking fence posts? Were the gums yellow? Elias stared at her. Then he answered yes to all 3. Lian said nothing for a moment. Then she looked at Chen, looked back at Elias, and asked the question that would decide the rest of his life. "If I come," she said, each word careful, "will you obey what you do not understand?" Elias bristled at the word obey. She saw it, so she changed nothing. She waited. A proud man can mistake silence for insult. A desperate man can sometimes hear it as mercy. Elias swallowed and said, "If it saves the ranch, yes." Lian studied him for another long second. "Not if it saves your pride," she said. "If it saves the ranch." That was the bargain. Not romance, not rescue, not some sweet frontier tale people would later soften to make themselves comfortable. A bargain. Lian would come to Mercer Creek. She would bring what she knew. Elias would give her legal standing in his household, half interest in the preservation business if it lived, and her name written beside his in the ranch ledger where purchases and debts were recorded. Amos witnessed the agreement. Chen Bao witnessed it too, and 3 days later Lian Zhou arrived at Mercer Creek with 2 trunks, 6 wax-sealed clay jars, a bundle of dried roots tied in red cord, and a small black notebook filled with characters Elias could not read. The first thing she did was not inspect the house. It was not unpack. It was not ask where she would sleep. She walked straight past Elias, past Amos, past the barn, and up the rise toward the north pasture. The wind pulled at her dark coat. Her boots sank in old dust. Elias followed, embarrassed by every broken fence post and every thin animal she passed. At the trough, Lian knelt. She dipped 2 fingers into the water, touched them to her tongue, then spat instantly into the dirt. Elias felt heat rise in his face. "That water comes clean from the draw," he said. Lian looked down at the trough, then at the pale crust along its rim. "It comes clear," she said. "Clear is not the same as clean." That sentence hit Elias harder than any bank letter. For the next 6 hours, Lian walked the land like she was reading a page written under the grass. She scraped sediment from the creek stones. She smelled the damp soil behind the trough. She watched where the cattle chose to stand and where they avoided grazing. She broke a clump of earth in her palm and showed Elias the white mineral veins inside it. At dusk, she came into the cabin, set her notebook on the table, and told him what was killing his herd. Not fever, not bad luck. A bitter seep had opened above the north draw after the dry years cracked the bank. Every rain washed alkali and mineral salts into the water. The cattle drank most often. Not enough to kill at once, enough to poison slowly. The sickness had a route, a pattern, a source. Elias gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles paled. He had ridden past that trough every day. He had cursed the sky, the grass, the animals, the doctors, the bank, and God. But not once had he suspected the clear water. Lian drew a rough map. They would fence the north trough by morning. They would haul spring water in barrels for the weak animals. They would cut a temporary channel to pull cleaner runoff toward the lower pasture. They would dig out the mineral crust and line the trough with fresh plank. They would stop driving the herd where the ground itself was betraying them. Then she opened one of the clay jars. Inside was a sharp, earthy smell Elias could not place. "This is not magic," she said, before he could decide whether to fear it. "Rest, clean water, better feed. Time. This only helps the body do what it is already trying to do." The first week nearly broke them. Amos and Elias dug channels until their palms tore. 2 hired boys from a neighboring spread came for cash. Elias did not have, and left before noon when they saw a Chinese woman marking the ditch line with willow sticks. By the second day, men in town had heard. By the third, Elias found the word Chinaman scratched into the dust on his own gatepost. He rubbed it out with his glove. Lian saw him do it. She did not thank him. She only handed him another steak and pointed to the next place it needed to go. That was how she worked. No speeches, no pleading to be believed. Only task after task after task, each one connected to the next by a logic Elias could feel before he could explain. The weak animals were separated. The worst of them were given warm mash with small amounts of dried root and bitter greens Lian prepared carefully, never more than she measured. The spring barrels were scrubbed twice a day. Salt blocks were moved. The cattle were rotated away from the ruined draw in small groups, so they would not trample the lower grass to nothing. At night, Lian turned to the second problem. Food, not for the cattle, for the ranch. Elias had thin beef he could not sell at a decent price. A smokehouse with a cracked door, salt in sacks, cold weather coming, and no cash. Lian stood in the smokehouse doorway, studying the blackened beams. "How many pounds can you cut before sunrise?" she asked. Elias laughed once, empty and bitter. "Enough to remind me how poor I am." Lian did not smile. "Then cut." So he cut. Amos cut too. They sliced the poorest sale beef into long strips. Lian mixed salt by weight, not handful. She used a small balance scale from her trunk, vinegar from a brown bottle, crushed pepper and smoke kept low and steady with apple wood Elias had been saving for house heat. The timing mattered. The heat mattered. The spacing mattered. The way the meat was turned mattered. Elias tried to rush one rack. Lian slapped his hand with the flat side of a knife. "Not hard. Hard enough. This is not hurry food," she said. By dawn the smokehouse smelled rich, sharp, and clean. By the third day even Amos admitted the beef was different from trail jerky. It did not taste like punishment. It tasted like something a man would pay to eat twice. Lian packed the first 20 pounds in clean cloth, sealed them in a small crate, and told Elias to take it to the stage station west of town. The station keeper, a square-faced man named Dobbins, looked at the crate, looked at Elias, and asked who had made it. Elias knew what the wrong answer would cost. "He gave it anyway. My wife." Dobbins looked toward the road as if someone might overhear. "The Chinese woman?" Elias said. "The woman who made the beef." Dobbins took one strip to humor him, then another. Then he bought the crate, not generously, but in cash. Cash was time, and time, Lian said, was the only thing a dying ranch could not grow for itself. For 6 weeks, nothing looked like a miracle. That mattered. The ranch did not turn green overnight. The cattle did not rise up shining. No heavenly sign came down on Mercer Creek. There was only ugly work, frozen ropes, dirty barrels, smoke in the eyes, ledger columns that still ended badly, a bank notice folded on the mantel, neighbors slowing their horses on the road to stare, then riding on with smirks they did not bother to hide. One afternoon in December, Elias came back from town with the second bank notice in his coat. The note gave him until May. After that, the land, herd, house, and equipment could be sold in pieces. He found Lian in the barn, kneeling beside a sick heifer, one hand pressed against the animal's neck while she listened to its breathing. "She should have been dead 2 weeks ago," Elias said quietly. Lian did not look up. "She is not dead today. That may not be enough." Now she looked at him. Her face was tired. There was straw caught on the sleeve of her coat. Her hands were red from cold water. "No," she said, "it is not enough." That honesty should have hurt. Instead, it steadied him, because Lian never gave comfort she could not prove. The darkest night came in January. A Chinook wind softened the snow too fast, and the temporary channel above the lower pasture collapsed in the dark. By lantern light, Elias saw water cutting the wrong direction, racing toward the very ground they had fenced off. 3 calves were already bawling near the wash. The herd pressed nervously against the rails. Amos shouted that they should open the old gate and drive everything uphill. That meant using the poisoned trough again. It was the fastest move, the familiar move, the move Elias would have made 6 months earlier. Lian climbed onto the fence rail, lantern light flashing across her face, and shouted over the wind, not uphill, across. Amos swore. Elias hesitated. That hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. But in those 2 seconds, every old part of him fought to take back command. Then he saw Lian's hand, not shaking, pointing. She had read the slope in the dark better than he had read his own ranch in daylight. Elias turned to Amos. Across, they moved the herd through mud, ice, and black water for 3 hours. 1 calf went down. Lian and Elias pulled it by rope and bare hands through the wash. Amos lost a boot. The lantern blew out twice. By the time the first gray line of morning touched the hills, the herd stood in the lower meadow, wet and trembling, but alive. Elias sat down in the mud because his legs had stopped believing in him. Lian stood beside him. The collapsed ditch gaped behind them like an accusation. Elias expected her to say they had failed. Instead, she looked over the herd and said, "Now we know where the water wants to go." That was when Elias began to understand. To him, a failure was a verdict. To Lian, it was information. By March, the dying slowed. By April, it stopped. Not one new animal fell in the North sickness. The weakest cows did not become strong, but they stopped sinking. The calves born that spring came smaller than Elias wanted, but most of them lived. The lower pasture, treated through the winter with composted bedding, ash, manure, and carefully cut irrigation channels, showed green at the edges while neighboring fields still lay gray. Men rode out to see it. They tried not to look impressed. That made Amos happier than praise. The preserved beef became the second proof. Dobbins at the stage station ordered twice a month. A timber camp took 40 pounds. Then a railroad buyer passing through Missoula bought a crate for crews working west of the divide. The label on the first shipments read Mercer Creek Cured Beef. Lian stared at it for a long time. Then she took Elias's pencil and wrote one word beneath it. Z-Ho. Elias looked at the label, then at her, then he nodded. After that, every crate left the ranch with both names burned into the lid. Mercer Zhou, some buyers complained. They still bought the beef. That was how prejudice often behaved when profit entered the room. It did not vanish. It simply learned to count. The marriage changed more slowly than the ranch. At first, Elias and Lian were partners who slept under the same roof and spoke mostly of work. They argued over everything that mattered. How many cattle to sell? How long to rest the north pasture? Whether to spend cash on plank or seed? Whether Amos should be allowed to smoke inside the curing shed? Elias discovered that Lian's anger was quiet but extremely precise. Lian discovered that Elias could be stubborn for foolish reasons, but not forever. That was important. A man who is wrong and stays wrong is dangerous. A man who is wrong and can be taught is merely expensive. In the evenings, Elias began bringing her questions instead of objections. Why did the wild rye return first, near the shaded bank? Why did one trough gather mineral crust faster than another? Why did smoke turn bitter when the wood was too hot? Why did weak cattle drink too much instead of too little? Lian answered when she knew. When she did not, she said, "I do not know yet." Elias came to respect that answer more than certainty, because every man who had nearly ruined him had sounded certain. By the second summer, Mercer Zhou Ranch was still not rich, but it was alive. The bank agreed to extend the note because Elias brought cash, crates, and weight records instead of promises. The herd had climbed from 73 animals to 91, with 58 in solid condition. The north draw was no longer used for drinking water. The lower meadow, once the poorest section of the ranch, carried the young stock through a dry August without turning bare. And Lian had begun teaching, not formally, not with a sign on the door. It began with Amos, who had outlived too much pride to worship it. He asked her to show him the watermarks. Then Dobbins sent his wife to learn the curing process, because stage meat spoiled too often in summer. Then a neighboring rancher, who had once laughed at Elias in town, rode over with a dead calf tied behind his saddle and asked Lian to look at the animal. He did not apologize. Lian examined the calf anyway. After he left, Elias asked why she had helped him. She looked at him as if the answer were obvious. A sick animal does not know which man laughed. That line stayed with Elias for the rest of his life. Love did not arrive at Mercer Creek as a violin song. It came in quieter forms. A cup of coffee left near Lian's notebook before dawn. A wool scarf Elias bought in town and pretended was only practical. Lian repairing the tear in his winter coat without mentioning it. Elias refusing a buyer who wanted the curing method but not the Joe name on the crate. The first time he took her hand, it was not during a moonlit walk. It was in the barn, after a calf that should have died took its first shaky breath. They were both covered in mud. Amos was asleep on a feed sack. The wind outside was trying to pry boards from the wall. The calf stood. Lian closed her eyes, just for a second. Elias reached for her hand because there was nowhere else for all that relief to go. She let him hold it. That was enough. By the 5th year, people no longer called Mercer Creek a failing ranch. They called it the place with the green lower meadow, the place with the strange water channels, the place that shipped beef clear to Helena without spoilage, the place where a Chinese woman could look at a pasture and tell you what your animals would suffer from next month. Some said this with respect. Some said it with resentment. Both groups rode out when their own problems became expensive. The numbers became impossible to dismiss. In 6 seasons, the herd grew from 73 weak animals to more than 300 head. The banknote was paid off 2 years early. The curing shed expanded twice, and every winter, when other ranches sold thin cattle cheap because they could not feed them through the cold, Mercer Joe sold preserved beef at steady prices to stage lines, lumber crews, and rail camps that needed food more than they needed prejudice. But the real wealth was not the beef. It was the system. Clean water routes, rested pasture, measured salt, recorded calving, soil fed before it was demanded from. Animals watched before they collapsed. Knowledge written down so it could survive the person who first carried it. That was what Lian had brought across the divide in 2 trunks and 6 sealed jars. Not a trick, not a miracle, a way of seeing. Years later, when travelers stopped at Mercer Joe and asked Elias how he had saved the ranch, he always corrected the question. He did not save it. Not alone. He had owned the land. He had known cattle. He had worked until his body shook. But he had mistaken possession for understanding. Lian had taught him the difference. The creek had been speaking the whole time. Elias was simply, finally, humble enough to hear it.